question and answer portion. Are there people that have questions? Frank, do you want to try to just speak loudly, and we'll see if people can hear
I'll try, okay? I can hear my echo, so I'm guessing you can hear me too. So my question is this, on your first project, which I thought was very interesting. The second one's interesting too, but on the first one, okay. So what I'm thinking on this is, like, I'm a computer scientist too, okay, and I'm involved in overlapping stuff. But what I will say is that as a user, when we use things like Google Translate or things like that, largely they're statistically driven, okay? And one of the problems, which I'm sure you're well aware of in terms of neural nets, is that we don't have a sense of why they're behaving in a particular way, which gets into the reason why they can't be used in safety systems and all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So another approach, and I'd say the third thing, based on what you presented, is largely the attributes of morphological in terms of stuff that we can see and touch. That's with, unaided, okay? So my question is this. What's the bridge towards getting, towards codifying that knowledge or knowledge representation? Because what I would see on this, so like, say for example, on the birds, there's a variety of taxonomies that you can use, and there are ontologies that are associated with them. And in the end, since you really do have the experts, what it sounds like, the people who really know this, as opposed to people who just sort of have casual knowledge, which can be wrong, it would seem like the next step on this would be towards the ontologies and the terminalizing, this in a sense of concept systems and, actually well-defined terms, because those things that you were pointing out, the next step is, okay, from a classification perspective, I'm looking at, characteristics and properties, and that really gets to making it really of scientific value, as opposed to something of engineering value. So what's your take on that? Is that within the scope of what you're doing, or this is just a certain phase and maybe that's later on? Thank you.
That's a fantastic question, and it kind of sketches a narrative of what is happening in our field right now. I identify as a computer vision researcher first and machine learning researcher second. And that means I have a certain pragmatism when it comes to machine learning. I'll use it when it helps, but if it's just sort of to amuse ourselves mathematically, then I won't use it. So what you're talking about touches on this really important agenda. It's always been important, but it's just become more important recently, which is explainable AI or interpretability. So we entered this game with that very much in mind. All of what we were doing before the days of deep learning was rooted in classic field guides: characters, traits, classification keys, dichotomous keys, polychotomous keys. These are things that have been known and trusted for hundreds of years. And the problem was, it just didn't work that well. And part of it was that the deep learning plus big data plus crowdsourcing revolution hadn't happened yet. But there's this other thing, that there was so much breathless excitement about deep learning when it happened that people just threw away everything else. So it just became a big black box, and you shove data into it and you get out answers. But like you said, it has some bizarre failure modes. But the field was still reluctant to go back to these kinds of interpretable attributes, because there's this, I don't think anyone's written it down this way, but there's an interpretability tax. If you go back to this, you end up losing performance, because the computer finds some really bizarre ways to classify these things that are actually not interpretable at all.
Right.
But it's kind of getting away with murder because it hasn't seen everything. So you can actually distort the image in some way and have it make preposterous classifications, but you wouldn't know because during training it didn't see that. So right now there is this gap in performance, this interpretability tax. And this is in fact a very important area of research where I think that the hype has died down just enough in deep learning to sneak some of that back in. because when deep learning fails, the results are weird. And so we want to open the hood and show something like, well, okay, it got it wrong, but here's where I think the bill is. Here's where I think the belly is, and stuff like that. But during the really heady, crazy days of deep learning, no one even cared because it gave such big performance benefits. But incoming PhD students now are not satisfied with the black box. Everybody's talking about interpretability, explainable AI, and so on. So I think what you described is extremely relevant. And it's kind of a relief for me because most of what I did, all my training and this preparation and stuff, this was before deep learning came along. And it, it made my heart stop to see how well it worked. But in fact, as the data sets get bigger, you find out it doesn't work on everything, and this stuff becomes extremely important.
I would just say, so birds are nice to look at, but humans are different, especially when it comes to things like, say, for example, automated driving systems, or bail determination.
Or what?
Bail.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems with machine learning and bail.
Yeah.
Expert systems determining bail outcomes.
Yeah.
Other questions? Bobby? No, we got a mic coming for you.
I know there is and has been for quite some time a program, the name of which of course I've forgotten because I can't remember names anymore, a program that identifies music. Now, how does that relate to this? Is it so much simpler that it's been around for a long time?
Yeah. Is it Shazam? Shazam. Yeah. So there's two generations of those. There's one that is appears to be similar, but in terms of its inner workings, it's not similar at all. And then there's a second generation of it that's actually quite similar to this. The first one, the classic Shazam, and then many copycats came out. When it recognizes a song, it had to be exactly that recording of it, the studio version from that particular album. And so if you were to play it on guitar or whistle it, it wouldn't work. So it turns out, I know